Welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Semi. Today I'm going to teach you how to do English paper piecing. These instructions will work for any English paper piecing template, but today we are going to be making hexies, and specifically in the grandmother's flower garden pattern. So I have a stash of these, and I kind of just work on them intermittently whenever I'm traveling, and I'm going to have a lot of time where I'm just kind of sitting and idle. And a lot of quilters have a project like this that they can just easily take with them. These are pretty tiny. You can stuff enough in your bag to make a few of them while you are on a plane ride or sitting at a doctor's office, and you can get quite a lot done. So I'm going to show you some tips on how to get it ready and save your hands from having to poke holes through to do basting by needle, which is how I started. And then I'm going to show you how to sew it all together so you can make your own. So I have a lot of 1930s reproduction prints here to make these grandmother flower gardens. That's what this pattern was traditionally made in, so that's what I'm doing here. But you can feel free to use any type of fabric you want in this. Batiks look great. I've seen a lot of Tulip Pink lately since she just released her latest line, and they all look gorgeous. So feel free to break out of the traditional color palette. Set these aside and let's get started. You need a few things in order to do English paper piecing. First, you need a template. They come in these little cardstock templates, and they come in all shapes and sizes. I have 1-inch hexagons, which means it is 1 inch on each side. So it actually is about a little over 2 inches from side to side here, which means I need a 2.5-inch square in order for this to cover. So you're going to want to measure the widest part of your template to decide what size square you need underneath. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to lay the template on the wrong side of the fabric, and I'm just going to go ahead and trim away the edges so you get about 1/4 inch seam. It really doesn't matter if you are exact on this. You don't really want to get too skinny, but the accuracy comes from wrapping the fabric around the template, not from getting a perfect 1/4 inch seam. So you don't necessarily have to take a ton of time with this step. So when I first started doing these, as you can see with this one, I basted all these with a needle by hand. And when I started doing this, I was like maybe 26, and this was even tiring at that point for my hands. So you definitely want to make sure that you do something that you can have some longevity with. One thing that I really find that works well is the Sew Line fabric glue pen, and it just makes it really easy to baste your fabric down without getting hand fatigue. So what I do is I just pull a stripe around the top here, and then I just go around the sides and keep folding those over. And this is water soluble, which means when you wash your quilt someday, the glue will go away and it dries clear. So you really could use this for a lot of things in sewing, but it works really well for this because it's really fast and it's really easy on your hands. So once I press it down, I also flip it over and give it a good press with my fingers as well. And so if you're doing this for a grandmother's flower garden, you're going to want 1 center, 6 of your first petal, and 12 of your second petal. So now it's time to actually sew these together. So for this part of the project, I recommend a thimble. I really like the Nimble thimble. It is made of leather, and then it has a nice little metal piece in the top. They do get worn out in time, but they fit really nicely on my finger. And then you want some hand quilting thread. And I really like the stuff from Gutermann. It has a little coating on it, which makes it less likely to knot, which is really good when you're doing a lot of hand quilting. So what I do is I just find the edge, and I'm going to get a length of thread about from my hand to my elbow. That's a good length to work with. It's less likely to knot, and then you'll be all right there. So I'm just grabbing some needles, any kind will be fine. You want something that you can easily work with for a long time. So if you have a preference on that, feel free to go with that. Alright, so I'm threading this needle, and now I'm going to sew what's called a quilter's knot. So to tie a quilter's knot, what you do is you lay your thread pointing away from the tip of your needle, and then you're going to pinch that with your thumb and your forefinger. I'm going to twist that around 3 times around the needle, going toward me, and then I'm going to pull it down so I can pinch those twists between my thumb and forefinger. Now I'm just going to pull that needle out and holding those twists between my thumb and forefinger, pull that all the way down to the bottom of the thread, and now I have a quilter's knot, which it's probably kind of difficult to see, but it's really a neat little trick and it makes for a good secure join. So I'm going to start with 2 pieces. I have my yellow center and I have my peach piece, which is going to be part of the first flower petal. And I'm going to lay those right sides together, and it really doesn't matter what side you start with, but you're going to just go ahead and start sewing just one side together. So what I'm going to do here is I like to hold them kind of upright. It makes it easier for me to see what's going on. And I'm going to just go ahead and put my needle through both of these points. Pull that all the way through. And I always go through twice at these points. You really want them to be secure. There's going to be a lot of tugging on them because there's going to be a lot of other joins to that point as well. So now I'm just grabbing a little bite of fabric and just going down that line. And I'm maybe keeping my stitches like every 32nd of an inch or so. You really want to do this good and secure, because it's not like you're using a regular sewing machine to do this. Sometimes your thread will get caught around those points. That's okay. I threaded my needle there, so we're going to have to stop and rethread that. It happens. And this is called a whip stitch, if you've never done it before. I'm just catching the tops of those fabrics, and I'm making sure that I'm catching the fabrics and not the template, because we do not want to damage the edges of those templates, because we're going to reuse them after you pull these apart. So once all these are sewn together and you have no raw edges, you can remove the paper templates. And then you can reuse them for other flowers. So I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. Alright, so now I'm back to the corner. And I'm going to sew twice through that corner. So now I have my first piece attached to my first petal. So next comes another petal that we have to add on. So we can do 1 or 2 things. Our thread just came out right here, so I can either sew these 2 edges together, or I can sew these 2 edges together. Really doesn't matter. You just want to pick one. I'm going to go ahead and go with these 2. So I'm just flipping that right sides together. And again, I like to turn this on its side so that it's facing up toward me and I can see really clearly. So since these are so small, I really can just kind of pinch these between my fingers. There's really no need to pin. So just like before, I'm going to go ahead and go through this point twice, just to make sure that it is really snug on there. And just like before, I'm going to go ahead and whip stitch all the way across, about every 32nd of an inch. If you think about it, your sewing machine takes pretty small stitches. So you kind of want to mimic that as much as possible with your hand sewing. Just catch a little bit of fabric, making sure not to catch that template. And you kind of get used to this a little bit as you go. When you first do it, it's really very awkward, but you kind of get used to the feeling of holding it and sewing and all that. Alright, so now I've come to my corner. And this time I need to break off my thread. So instead of pulling all the way through, I left a loop and I just brought my needle through it to knot that off. Now I'm going to do it one more time just for security. So I've left a loop, putting my needle through, and then pull that tight. And now we're going to go ahead and clip this thread. Okay, so now we have our first petal. It's stitched our other first petal, but we need to also stitch it to the center. So here, you're going to flip it so it's right sides together. It's okay to bend these templates a little bit. You're going to need to as you go to put everything together. And I always flip it so that way I am definitely sewing from my right to left, because I'm right-handed, so that's what works for me. If you're left-handed, you would want to do that a little bit differently. And I actually kind of skipped a step. I need to tie another quilter's knot here. So again, we just take it and go around 3 times toward us. Pinch that between your fingers, pull your needle through, and now we have a nice quilter's knot without too much fuss. Alright, so when I'm pinching and I'm starting to have more layers together, I just really want to make sure that these points here are together on the end. So now I'm just going and I'm catching the first corners, and there's a little bit of a gap there. So that's why I like to go through that twice to get that really good and snug. Then we just continue whip stitching. About every 32nd of an inch or so. And I know a lot of people like to really match their thread color to the fabrics they're working on. I almost never do that, even in this. I always just go with like a neutral, nude, or gray, and I just never see it. I still have quite the thread collection, but I use it more for when I'm doing garments and things for my daughter than matching whatever quilting fabric I'm working on. Alright, so we're to our corner. I'm going to go ahead and sew through that twice. Again. And we're not breaking thread because we can go ahead and add another piece here yet. So what I can do, and I'm not going to do it here because it's just repetitive at this point, is I need to add hexagon pieces all the way around these sides, and you're just going to keep going. You know, I can add another piece and I can sew up here, and I can sew these together first and then come around the side again and stitch those together. And it's just the exact same process of putting these first 3 together, just it keeps getting bigger and bigger. So through the magic of video editing, I have sewn all of my little hexies together to make the grandmother's flower garden pattern, but we're not quite done yet. What I have to do is I have to pop out all of the templates for the center. So here's how you do it. So I want to make sure I leave all the templates in these outer petals because we still need to attach more hexies to the side to make this a full top someday, but I no longer need the ones that are in the center because we have sewn all of those sides together. So the rule of thumb is if you have sides that still need to be sewn together, then those templates stay in. If all 6 sides in this case have been sewn to another side, then you're okay to pop that template out. So you kind of have to do a little bit of tugging because you got to get that glue to separate from the template. But you can kind of just get your fingernail worked underneath there. And then, so a little stuck right there. And then you just pop that template out and you're done. You can reuse this for another one. So I'm going to go ahead and pop out these as well. You should too if you're doing the grandmother's flower garden pattern. But otherwise, our block is finished. Thank you so much for following along with this tutorial on how to do English paper piecing. I'd love to see what projects you create with English paper piecing. Make sure to share them on the Quilt Addicts Anonymous Facebook page. You can just go to facebook.com/Quilt Addicts Anonymous and you can share it there. So thanks so much for following along. You can watch more free video tutorials to learn other tips and tricks and new techniques for quilting at quiltaddictsanonymous.com. Just click on the tutorial page. Until next time, happy quilting!